What if Europe's most dangerous conflict isn't unfolding in the glare of international headlines, but in a fog of strategic silence, careful maneuvering, and a contest of nerves? What if right now, the fate of peace on the continent is being decided not by grand speeches or open warfare, but by a series of actions so subtle that most people never realize what's at stake until it's almost too late? And what if almost no one is telling you the full story, the one hidden beneath the noise, where every movement counts and every moment could tip the balance? Picture the scene. As much of Europe drifted into another quiet night, NATO suddenly launched its largest military drills in decades, less than 20 kilometers from the Russian border. The date was a chilly spring evening, one that would be remembered for years to come. In Lithuania, Poland, and across the Baltic Sea, columns of armored vehicles rumbled over fields that had been still only hours before. Satellite images, later confirmed by independent analysts, revealed hundreds of tanks, armored personnel carriers, and mobile artillery assembling in numbers unseen since the final years of the Cold War, more than 30 years ago. The scale was staggering. Residents in border villages awoke to the distant thunder of engines and the shimmering streaks of jet afterburners slicing through the dawn sky. Commercial flight trackers showed something even more alarming. A blank patch suddenly appeared on Europe's air traffic maps, a zone of silence stretching across the Baltic region. Civilian airliners were abruptly rerouted, their pilots instructed to avoid the airspace entirely. Air traffic controllers, usually unflappable, whispered to colleagues about new forbidden skies and the possibility that something extraordinary, maybe even historic, was unfolding just out of view. It wasn't just the military who noticed. Freight shipments were delayed, commercial shipping routes altered, and insurance premiums for cargo passing through the Baltic Sea shot up overnight. The financial world took notice. The euro dipped, oil prices spiked, and the stock markets in Frankfurt and Warsaw opened to nervous speculation. Already, the ripple effects of these maneuvers were being felt far from the front lines. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the response was both swift and eerily composed. Within 1 hour of the first satellite images leaking onto social media, the Kremlin issued a statement so restrained it sent chills through seasoned analysts. All necessary measures have been taken. The situation is under control. No threats, no bluster. Just a flat, clinical assurance that Russia's eyes were fixed on every NATO move, and that any further escalation would be met in kind. But the calm was deceptive. Beneath the surface, Russia's military machine whirred to life. In Kaliningrad, that heavily fortified Russian enclave wedged between Poland and Lithuania, observers reported a sudden surge in air activity. Fighter jets scrambled at dawn, their contrails crisscrossing the sky above the Baltic coast. Air defense units along Russia's western frontier were quietly raised to a higher state of readiness. Radar dishes turning, missile batteries humming, command posts lighting up with new orders. Foreign journalists stationed in the region described an atmosphere thick with unease. Residents in the tense Suwalki corridor, a narrow strip of land connecting Poland and Lithuania, long considered NATO's most vulnerable point, spoke of convoys moving by night and the low growl of engines reverberating through the forests. Military observers noted an uptick in patrols, checkpoints, and the deployment of mobile anti-aircraft systems. It was, as one veteran analyst put it, the kind of preparation you make when you expect the unexpected. And yet, in Western capitals, the tone was remarkably different. Spokespeople in Berlin, Paris, Brussels, and Washington insisted that these were just routine exercises, part of the annual cycle of NATO training. They assured the public there was nothing unusual, nothing to fear. But independent satellite imagery told a different story. The concentration of hardware in the region was more than 3 times higher than during any previous drills in the past decade. Makeshift field bases sprouted overnight, and supply trucks shuttled back and forth in a logistical ballet that suggested planning on a scale rarely seen outside wartime. This wasn't a rehearsal. This was a live escalation, unfolding hour by hour. European newsrooms quickly picked up on the growing sense of unease. Veteran military reporters, some with memories stretching back to the tense standoffs of the 1980s, openly questioned the official narrative. Why this sudden tempo, this scale, this proximity? Was this truly just another drill, or was it a pointed message to Moscow, a trial of nerves designed to test Russia's military and political resolve? The peril was clear. If these maneuvers were mistaken for mere business as usual, both officials and ordinary citizens could miss the warning signs of something far more dangerous. In this precarious climate, a single misreading, a radar blip interpreted as a missile launch or a patrol crossing an invisible line, could threaten not only peace, but the very stability of Europe's economic and political systems. It wouldn't be the first time. In 1983, a similar misunderstanding during NATO's Able Archer exercise nearly triggered a nuclear response from the Soviet Union. Only the cool heads of a few individuals prevented catastrophe. As the hours ticked by, contradictions multiplied. NATO insisted the exercises were routine, yet the scale and speed of deployment told a different story. Russian officials maintained their composure, but their military posture hinted at deep concern. The battlefield shifted from forests and airfields to a theater of perception, where every move doubled as a message and every delay a test of will. It's a scenario laden with historical echoes. Consider the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, a confrontation defined as much by what was left unsaid as by open threats. For 13 days, the world held its breath while American and Soviet forces stared each other down over the fate of nuclear missiles in Cuba. It was not the loudest voices that determined the outcome, but the patience and restraint shown behind closed doors, and the willingness of both sides to read the other's signals correctly. Now, as the world watches and waits, the question is not just what happened, but what might come next. Will these maneuvers conclude as so many before them have, or is this the opening move in a much more dangerous game? Did NATO cross an invisible line this time, and did Moscow's answer quietly redraw the rules of engagement? This is not a contest of tanks blasting across borders or missiles arcing through the night sky. It is instead a contest of commands and countermoves, each maneuver a statement in an escalating language of signals. Every change in deployment, every flight path altered, becomes part of a silent conversation, as tense as any spoken threat. Inside NATO headquarters in Brussels, officials maintain that these military drills are well within the parameters of established agreements. They cite decades of precedent, pointing to the Vienna document and other treaties that require notification and transparency in military exercises. Yet, in Moscow, such assurances are dismissed as little more than diplomatic cover. Russian leaders see NATO's sudden, synchronized exercises near their borders as a direct challenge, not just to their military strength, but to their political will and sovereignty. To them, this is no rehearsal. It is a provocation, calculated to test resolve and perhaps even to probe for weaknesses. The Russian response is swift, but measured. There are no fiery declarations on state television, no saber rattling in the streets. Instead, a brief clipped announcement. All necessary measures have been taken. The situation is under control. Beneath this calm, however, Russia matches NATO's moves step for step. Fighter jets patrol the skies above Kaliningrad. Missile batteries reposition along the frontier. Electronic warfare teams deploy, ready to jam or intercept communications. The message is clear. Discipline, not bravado, will define this standoff. Meanwhile, in capitals across Europe, the mood is anxious and divided. In Warsaw and Vilnius, leaders publicly insist that everything is normal, even as extra battalions quietly move east and emergency meetings are convened behind closed doors. In Brussels, the halls of NATO buzz with urgent consultations. France and Italy call for neutral observers to diffuse tensions, advocating transparency as a way to rebuild trust. The United States and Lithuania, on the other hand, dismiss the suggestion, arguing that Russia cannot be trusted to respect any agreements. The result is a patchwork of uncertainty, with each country calibrating its response according to its own interests and fears. On social media, the information war erupts. Hashtags surge in Russian and English. Eyewitnesses upload shaky footage of jets streaking overhead. Satellite images reveal armored convoys parked where only empty fields had been days before. Rumors multiply, denials follow, and narratives compete for dominance. It is a battle not just for territory, but for perception, for the hearts and minds of millions. Western analysts split into camps. Some argue that this is merely a psychological contest, designed to provoke without crossing the ultimate line. Others warn of a more dangerous spiral, a pattern of brinkmanship that could, through miscalculation, ignite catastrophe. They recall the chain reactions that led to World War I, when a single assassination in Sarajevo set off a cascade of alliances, mobilizations, and declarations that no one could stop. The stakes, in this moment, feel existential. A mistaken assumption, reading caution as weakness or resolve as aggression, could do more than trigger a diplomatic crisis. It could cost lives, destabilize economies across Europe, and send tremors through world markets. Ordinary people, glued to live updates, find themselves witnesses to a history that is being written in real time. Yet as each tense hour passes, it becomes clear that this confrontation is about more than who might strike first. It is about who can master the art of silent restraint. Which side will keep its nerve, and which might blink first, unleashing consequences no one can control. As night falls, neither alliance backs down. The world hovers between escalation and détente, between the panic of miscalculation and the hope of a new doctrine, one shaped not by words, but by the shadow play of readiness and restraint. The question is no longer whether the confrontation will escalate, but what form the next move will take, and how much further the boundaries might be tested. When words lose their force, actions become the only language left. As NATO's military drills intensify, the world becomes an uneasy audience to a dialogue conducted through maneuvers, not speeches. Russia's reply is deliberate and unmistakable. Without direct threats, it raises its own military alert, launches snap exercises, and puts its capabilities on display for all to see. Every move is precise, designed to communicate strength and resolve without crossing into open aggression. Across Europe, unity begins to splinter. Some leaders plead for patience, urging negotiation to keep tensions from erupting into crisis. Others harden their stance, sending more forces east, wary of appearing vulnerable as the atmosphere grows more charged. The debates are familiar. Should Europe choose dialogue or deterrence? In Berlin, lawmakers recall the lessons of Ostpolitik, a policy of engagement with the Soviet Union during the 1970s, credited with reducing tensions during the Cold War. In London, by contrast, the memory of Neville Chamberlain's appeasement of Nazi Germany in 1938 is invoked as a warning against giving ground to aggression. Markets tremble in response. The euro stumbles, oil prices leap upward, and the specter of invasion flashes across news tickers. Air traffic is rerouted, investors rush to shield assets, and a widening shadow of doubt settles over the Baltic region. Insurance companies raise premiums for flights and shipping passing near the conflict zone, and logistics firms scramble to adjust supply chains. In the supermarket aisles of Vilnius and Warsaw, anxious shoppers notice prices creeping up as uncertainty ripples through the economy. Signals from the United States and NATO blur the picture. Publicly, officials repeat assurances, but on the ground, new deployments and sudden aircraft movements hint at deeper worries. Behind the scenes, logistics become warnings. Fuel reserves are topped off, medical units are brought to readiness, and communications are encrypted. Both sides seem to brace for outcomes they hope to avoid, preparing for contingencies that, in another era, might have been unthinkable. A new red line forms, not in declarations, but in cautious gestures. The era of overt threats fades. Now, calculated calm and silent deterrence form the rules of engagement. Each action is measured, meant to prevent escalation, yet every gesture risks being misunderstood and spiraling into crisis. Military attachés meet in neutral capitals, hoping to clarify intentions and avoid the kind of fatal missteps that have sparked wars in the past. The consequences are real and immediate. If leaders misinterpret these silent signals, Europe could slip into a prolonged standoff, with daily life haunted by the tension of a new Cold War, or something worse. Ordinary citizens feel the pressure in rising costs and anxious headlines, while policymakers scramble to adapt, rewriting strategies as events unfold. In this moment, the world must ask, how do we navigate a reality where actions carry more meaning than words, and every move could tip the balance between peace and disaster? History offers both caution and hope. During the Berlin crisis of 1961, both sides built up forces on either side of the newly erected Berlin Wall. Yet, despite intense pressure, outright war was averted through a combination of back-channel diplomacy and strict discipline on the ground. The uneasy silence is broken only by the relentless choreography of troops and machines. Each side searches for reassurance, but the rules are changing faster than anyone can admit. For NATO, the challenge is to project unity and deterrence without provoking the very conflict they hope to avoid. For Russia, it is to demonstrate resolve without overstepping and triggering a wider confrontation. What if the quietest player at the table is the most dangerous and the most effective? In a contest full of shouting and panic, sometimes true power is measured in silence, not bluster. The lesson is not new. Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, wrote more than 2,000 years ago. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Russia's behavior in these fraught days has been a study in cold precision. While NATO's drills raised alarms, Moscow answered not with speeches, but with swift, understated moves, mobilizing units, raising alert levels, and making its capabilities clear without a torrent of words. The message is unmistakable. Real strength does not need to announce itself. Across Europe, the reaction is starkly different. Politicians issue grave warnings, news outlets blast urgent headlines, and social feeds erupt with rumor and dread. As public anxiety soars in the West, Russia's quiet discipline suggests another kind of mastery, one in which calm restraint, rather than panic, sets the tone. In Paris, talk shows feature heated debates. In Berlin, politicians argue late into the night about the appropriate response. This is the new front of information warfare: frantic social media on one side, calculated silence on the other. The outcome is not always shaped by the loudest voices. In fact, panic often serves the cool and prepared, while those swept up in drama may miss the subtle, decisive moves unfolding beneath the surface. The world saw this in 2008, when Russia moved into Georgia during the night, catching many by surprise. The lesson: watch what is done, not what is said. For those making policy, these events demand a new playbook. Words now matter less than quiet, credible action. The world is no longer listening only for threats. It is watching for the silent repositioning of forces, the sudden movement of equipment, the unannounced shift in posture. Strategy has become a chess game where the most meaningful moves come without fanfare or press conferences. For ordinary people, this lesson could not be more vital. Do not let headlines or drama alone shape your judgment. Pay attention to what is actually done, the discreet deployments, the small changes in policy, the careful signals sent without fanfare. In an era drowning in noise, the real clues are found in action, not rhetoric. The Berlin airlift of 1948 is a case in point. Western allies responded to the Soviet blockade of West Berlin not with threats, but with a massive, sustained airlift that quietly overcame the crisis. The consequences of misunderstanding these rules are immense. Overreact, and you risk panic, economic turmoil, or reckless escalation. But ignore the quiet signals, and you could be caught off guard by a real crisis. The line between peace and disaster now depends on who can stay calm, and who is observant enough to spot the real moves before it is too late. So after all the alarms, all the brinkmanship, and all the noise, what is the lesson the world cannot afford to forget from these tense days? The answer lies in watching deeds, not words. In a world where silence can be more powerful than any speech, attention to quiet action is the key to understanding what comes next. This is not just true for nations, but for individuals and families. Just as a seasoned chess player watches her opponent's hands, not his chatter, so must we all learn to read between the lines, in politics, in business, in our own communities. In a world where a single misstep can change history, silence sometimes shouts louder than sirens. The week's headlines screamed of escalation, warning lights, and drills on a knife's edge. Armored convoys rolled down frosted highways, fighter jets traced invisible boundaries in the sky, and news tickers bled with words like crisis and brinkmanship. Yet, beneath the furious broadcast, the true contest unfolded far from the cameras, in the calculated, wordless dance between Russia and Nato. Every move was deliberate, every pause loaded with meaning. While Western leaders issued grave statements and European parliaments argued late into the night, Moscow's reply was as cold as the winter outside. A spare message, almost clinical in its restraint. No threats, no boasts. Only the unmistakable promise. We see, we are ready, and we will act, but only if forced. Power, in this standoff, was not a matter of volume, but of timing. Russia's silence was not weakness, it was a signal. NATO pressed its drills closer than ever, its armored vehicles moving within sight, but not within range. In response, Russia layered its defenses, moved its pieces quietly, and drew invisible lines across the map. Jets scrambled, radars flickered, tank engines rumbled just out of view, but no one declared a red line. Instead, actions piled up, each more meaningful than the last. If you study the recent past, you'll see this is not the first time armies have met at the threshold. What sets this moment apart is who blinked first, and who refused to blink at all. The old rules of power dictated that threats and ultimatums would decide the day. Now, the battle is fought in gestures, in waiting, in the discipline to hold position while the world holds its breath. We live in an age where the loudest voice often drowns out the wisest move. But when peace, prosperity, and the borders of Europe hang in the balance, real power is measured in restraint. The ability to absorb a provocation without panic, to answer not with escalation, but with calm, silent readiness. This is the strength that shapes outcomes. If we keep mistaking noise for force, we risk missing the subtle decisions that set history's course. Thunderous rhetoric cannot shield nations, balance economies, or keep families safe in their homes. Today's most consequential actors do not need to shout. Their influence is measured in what they do, and in what they refuse to do. For millions watching from their living rooms, these are not remote games played by faceless generals. Each maneuver, each carefully measured step, can ripple outward. Food prices, job security, and the very promise of peace are caught in this silent contest. The rules are being rewritten right now, not in speeches, but in every restrained movement, every unspoken warning that passes between rival camps. So, the next time the world's attention is seized by a loud proclamation, remember, history is most often decided in the quiet, by those who act firmly and speak sparingly. In the hush between alarms, the fate of nations hangs by a thread, shaped not by noise, but by the discipline to stand firm and wait for the right moment. In these uncertain days, let us remember the wisdom of those who have faced danger before us. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was not the loudest voices, but the steadiest hands that saved the world. During the Berlin airlift, it was not threats, but patient, persistent action that won the day. And today, as Europe stands at another crossroads, we must look for the real signals, not in the din of headlines, but in the quiet strength of those who move with purpose, who speak with restraint, and who understand the immense power of silence. That is the story behind the silence, a contest for the future, fought not in shouts, but in the subtle moves that write history.